The op hadn't gone overly well. Now that was the fucking understatement of the goddamn century. It might as well have been the poster boy for FUBAR. The Cappy had been fragged 3 days ago. Sarge hadn't even made it off the dropship. Hell, half the unit was KIA, blown to pieces by plasma flak. 206 instant KIA. All that was left of our miserable assault was the 11 grunts with me. They all looked at me, standing next to the Lance Jack's boots, freshly smouldering. Why were they looking at me? Corporal Blackwell, universally known as Blackie, was the officer. I was a grunt just like them. Okay, he had just been fragged, but still. Gregor looked at me and worriedly asked, "What do we know?" I didn't know. Just because I was standing next to him when he got fragged didn't mean I know what to do. I might be known as the weirdo who liked to read old regs. Hell, I had even memorized some of the old Terran stuff. The Hague, the Geneva Convention. I had even read the IHL. I don't know. I'm just a weirdo. But that didn't mean you learned command through osmosis. Of course, it was Gregor who had to ask that. Fuck. I always hated that prick. What the hell do I know? Why were those bastards looking at me for support? I was just as lost as they were. I looked around the ground. Everyone was looking at me and said, "Fuck knows. Suppression fire? Beat those tin-clad bastards back." I could see all the lads around me nod. Someone looked up over the ridge of the foxhole we were stuck in and shouted, "Frag out!" Jimmy. "We need help. Command? Fleet? Someone," I asked Sean. "Do we have comms?" There was a large explosion. Sean shook his head. "Too much interference." Sean, good guy, cool as a cucumber. Good sniper. Nearly as good as Isaac. The others had peeked over the ridge and were unloading on the enemy. One of them even had the gall of saying, "You heard the man! Squad, light them up!" I was the man? Fuck no. I took a breath and said, "Okay, we can't stay here. We're going to skedaddle. Head for high ground. We can get concealment, set up base, and maybe cons will be able to punch through up there." I was totally speaking out of my ass, but it sounded reasonable. Heads nod. Fuck. I hate it. Why were they listening to me? Stop agreeing. Someone who knows what they're doing should take charge. I looked around the 11 men around me. Men, huh? I guess, technically, we were men. I think Andrew was the oldest, and he had only just celebrated his 20th birthday, like a month ago. Actually, fuck him. He was older than me. He should be the one taking charge. I guess that could wait, but when we got to a secured location, I would be having words with him. I looked at the guys and said, "Look, we're going to make 3 teams. Suppressing fire, so that's me, Gregor, Sean, and Andrew." Nods. "Stop nodding!" "The rest of you will move to the next cover. Then Nick, Jimmy, Mark, and John, you guys will provide suppressing fire, and the 4 of us will move up. Okay?" Nods. "Steve, Ali, Matt, and Isaac will scope higher ground and make sure that there's no tinnies up there." Nods. "Stop fucking nodding!" I was scared. No, I was terrified. I didn't know anything. I was just some dumb kid, and now it looked like I had the lives of 11 other men in my hands. Fuck! There was a lull in the battle, and I risked a look-see. Those tin bastards were building some sort of cannon on an anti-grav pad. Well, shit. No time for orderly retreat. Okay, fuck it. Mark, you were in charge of the firecracker, right? I looked at him and thought with increasing hatred. Don't you dare call me sir, you bastard. Don't you dare. Mark nodded. Yes, sir. Well, shit. Okay, we're going to lay a trap. We put the firebomb in our foxhole, lob a few smoke grenades, and we run. By the time the tinners have made it to our position, the fuse should be done. We can remote detonate, sir. Jimmy. Brown-nosed, snivelling snot. Don't call me sir, you prick. Okay, good. We do that. Remote detonation did make things easier, though. Okay, change of plan. Drop the ordnance, run, get to cover. When we see the bastards on sight, kaboom. We carefully pulled back from the position. making our way under fire up that hill 3 clicks to our rear. Treacherous terrain, but those freaks would find it difficult to dislodge us. That is, even if they found us. There were laser bolts and plasma shot flying through the air, but we still managed to pull out of there, under cover. Boom! The ground shook and I nearly lost my footing. A ball of fire rose from the ground, giving us the time to run. 20 minutes and 5 clicks later, we were hiding behind a boulder, covered in sweat, mud and blood. I turned to look at the men and saw Johnny and Matthew were missing. Out of breath, I gasped, "Where?" Mark put his hand on my shoulder and shook his head. "Shit! When did it happen?" I had lost 2 men and hadn't even realized. I felt nothing but disgust at myself. Commander of the Year. I looked at the rest of the guys. They looked like I felt. Tired. So fucking tired. I fell to the ground. I didn't even realize I was crying. I looked around at the guys and saw they were all trying to give me as much privacy as possible. These guys didn't deserve this. They needed someone who knew how to lead. And I was leading these guys to their deaths. They didn't deserve this. I could see the despair they felt. Hell, I felt that same despair. Those poor bastards. They didn't deserve this. A small voice in my head said. Still better than what happened to Johnny and Matthew. No. Fuck it. We weren't going to leave them here. Those boys deserve better than this. We were going to get them back. As the night fell, I knew I should have organized watches. I started looking at the guys and immediately knew I didn't have it in me to enforce them. Who the hell am I to give these men orders? They all deserve rest. I would stay up. Let them sleep. As the night gathered around us, I couldn't hold my tears back. I just cried in my solitude. Hopefully no one heard. Morning found us all alive. That was good. I was tired, but that's what the stim patches are for. I looked around the guys and said, "I'm sorry, guys, Stephen put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's okay, Dave. It's okay." No, it wasn't. It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. We shouldn't even be here. I shook my head. I needed to focus on something constructive. What could I do? I looked at Nick to ask, "Comms?" Nick somberly shook his head. Well, shit. There would be no pickup. What now? I looked at the rest of the boys and said, "How are we looking?" Nick said, "Comms work. We are getting through. There's just no one listening." Shit. Okay. Ordnance? Mark. We have 2 firecrackers, 1 tactical nuke, half a dozen smoke bombs, and a few flares. What the hell could I do with that? My mind wasn't really focusing on what the guys were saying. All I could think of was the boys we had left behind. They were all looking to me for guidance, but all I could think of was Johnny and Matthew. I mumbled, "I'm sorry. I don't think I can do this. Johnny and Matthew brought it because of me." The rest of the boys reassured me it wasn't my fault. They all said it was thanks to me that we had got out of there in the first place. I couldn't help but look around and think of Johnny and Matthew, laying on the ground out in the open, the tinnies doing God knows what to them. I went on. It just doesn't sit well with me. Confused looks. Johnny and Matthew. Somber looks. I don't know what you think, but I want them back. I want to give them a proper burial. There was a series of serious nods in the cabin we were hiding in. Gregor nodded and said, "We get them back." Jimmy nodded. "We get them back." Steve, "We get them back." Ali, "We get them back." The boys all repeated the same line. We would get them back. What had taken us 20 minutes to cover yesterday was taking over 2 hours, and we were only 3/4 there, but I wasn't taking any chances. I might not officially have a rank above basic grunt, but I would be damned if I let any of these knuckleheads around me get hurt. I had already lost 2. I wasn't going to lose another. Not if there was anything I could do about it. And the 2 I had lost, I would make sure they were taken care of. 2 hours later, we were looking at the devastation we had wrought yesterday. There were craters of every diameter over an area of a click, bits of bodies and broken equipment strewn everywhere. Something in me broke. So much death. I scoped the area and saw nothing. No movement. No. I had to stow it for the moment. Nick? No traffic on comms. Isaac? No tangos on scope. Looks clear, boss. Don't call me boss. Steve, Jimmy, Andy, you three will hold here and, if needed, give us suppression fire. Isaac, you'll be our eyes and call out threats as you see them. Gregor, you're Isaac's spotter. I got a round of, yes, sir. Bastards! Nick asked, what do Ellie and I do, sir? I sighed and said, the three of us do pickup. Nods. I took one last deep breath and moved out of cover. My head on a swivel, we made my way to the closest body. Movement! The three of us flattened on the ground and froze. What do you see, Sean? Tinny, 8 o'clock, on the ground. If possible, the three of us froze even more. 8 o'clock. There was a huge 30-meter diameter crater between us and the tinnies. Speak to me, Sean. I don't know, sir. He's not moving now. Can you take him? No, sir. Sorry, wrong angle. Relocation? Will take time, sir. He looked wounded. I relaxed a little and looked at the two soldiers behind me. You start pickup, I'll go look. Ellie and Nick started protesting, but I shut them down. I'm just going to see what's what. The two started protesting again, but I browbeat them into obedience and waited until they started moving towards Johnny. Poor kid. I crawled forward and 5 minutes later, I realized I was crossing enemy lines. There were more tinny corpses around me now. As I made my way forward, I crawled for the dead. Making my way up the other side of the crater, I eventually reached the lip. I looked over the ridge and saw tinnies, 3 of them, standing over a 4th who was clearly dead. The 3 of them were chanting that something like, ta-la-la-la, enkot magra. It went on for minutes. One of the few other sentences I'm pretty sure I understood right was when they said, Shantra ekovi malan. When they repeated the line a little higher, I heard Sean say, Sir, we have Johnny, don't see Matty. I scoped around and saw Matthew. His corpse was among the tinnies, about 10 meters from where the 3 weird tinnies were chanting. I kept on watching the tinnies' weird behavior. One of them took out a knife. He seemed to shove it in the dead tinny's mouth, and then there was a crack as he broke the corpse's mouth open. What the fuck? The 3 tinnies then went on to shout, Shantra ekovi malan. They then seemed to split up. This could be some sort of weird religious thing, right? Maybe that's how the tinnies paid their respects. I couldn't get Matthew. He was too far. Shit! I was out in the open. There was nothing I could do for him now. It tore me up, but Matty would have to wait. Don't worry, brother. I won't leave you here, but for now you're going to have to stay here. I'm sorry, I have to make my way back to the rest of the boys. I crawled as quickly and as quietly as I could. Before I made it over the ridge of the crater, I looked back and realized that the weird tinnies had made it to Matthew. I froze and panicked. They were going to desecrate my brother. They couldn't touch him. I wouldn't let them. I gripped my gun tighter. I hesitated for a sec. I knew the risk. If I did this, I would be giving up my POS. I was out in the open. I probably could get them all, but what if there were others I couldn't see? If there was a firefight, I was screwed, and my brothers would be in danger too. Fuming, I knew I should be making my way back to the others, but I couldn't. I looked away, unable to bear seeing my brother go that way. I sat in silence and stewed in my anger. Those tinnies were monsters. Fucking monsters. Breaking a dead guy's jaw? Barbaric. As I slept, I pictured Matthew, a knife shoved in his mouth and that horrendous crack. I woke up with a start. Nick was standing over me. Boss man, it's Johnny. He says he wants to see you. My fatigue instantly disappeared as I stood up and walked to where my buddy was laying on the ground. He looked deathly pale, I could see the huge gash in his side had been patched as best we could, but I didn't want to go there. I walked up to him, kneeling down at his side. "Hey, handsome. How's it going?" The man looked up at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a kid. "Hey, I hear you're the boss man." I ignored that and smiled at him. "We're going to get you out of here. You're going to be fine." In response, he coughed up a spout of blood. "I'm scared, man. Tell my ma. Mummy." It broke my heart. Fuck, he was just a kid. Man, I was just a kid. I didn't know what to say. I kept on smiling and said in my calmest voice, "It's okay, Johnny. It's okay. We've got you." Johnny tensed a second, his hand crushing mine in inhumane strength. Then he went limp. Dead. That night we buried Johnny. Properly. Nick even said a prayer over his body. I didn't think I could do it without bursting into tears. We weren't able to do it for Matty, but Johnny would have a proper burial, even if we had to dig his grave with our bare hands. As the night wore on, I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I tried, the faces of those two kids would be there. Those tinny bastards would pay for this. Monsters. Barbaric monsters. They desecrated the bodies of my brothers. Then came an unwanted thought. Did they, though? I saw them do that weird shit to their own. Breaking the jaw of a dead guy was definitely weird, but they had done it to their own. It must have had a meaning. It was just too deliberate to be random. It could be that they were just barbaric bastards, but this had meaning. I didn't understand it, but this definitely meant something for the tinnies. The following day, we tried to do some recon. Something to get us out of this hellhole. We were about 5 clicks from home base when Nick got on comms and stated, "Hey, boss man, you gotta see this." I guess I was boss man now. I quickly made my way to Nick's POS and saw him standing over a tinny. This tinny, though, wasn't dead. He was close, but he wasn't dead. He seemed to have had his guts blown out and had tried to crawl back to his home base. Sean immediately chambered around and Mark pulled out his knife. The creature obviously knew we were over it, and we heard it start to beg, "Ma Annie, Ma Annie." No idea what that meant, but this guy was dead. He knew it, I knew it. I guess Mani might mean mercy, mum, I don't know. I knelt down next to him and was struck by what had happened yesterday. Their priest guy had performed the rites for his guys and for my guys. He had made no distinction. I guess it's only fair to reciprocate. I racked my brains trying to remember what the bastard had said. What were the words again? Chandra Ekoli Malan. The guy looked up at me, confused, but his mouth seemed to form an O, and when he spoke, it was in a tone that sounded appeased. He softly said, "Chandra Ekovi Malan." I repeated each word individually. At every one of my words, his breathing seemed to calm down. He looked up at me, a single tear rolling down his cheek, and whispered, "Talak." Then his hand came to catch mine, and he held it for a second before going limp. So, what now? Do I break this guy's jaw? I guess. I pulled out my knife, shoved it into his mouth, gave it a sharp twist, until I heard a loud crack. That's fucked up, boss man. Nick was looking down at me. He wasn't wrong. I kept my back to him, looking at this tinny corpse, and whispered, "It's just their way to end things. They paid our people the honor of dying by their customs. I don't know. It just felt like it was the right thing to do." Sean buzzed comms and said, "Hey, you guys are too exposed here. I can't cover you." After a second, he buzzed again. "Hold. Spotter is ID 10 tangos inbound to your POS. Scouts, 300 meters out. At your 10 o'clock, movement behind them, 20 meters. A lot of movement. Recommend getting out of there." I got on comms and replied, "Copy, moving." Then I turned to the rest of the group and said, "You heard him. We scram." I started to move when I twisted my ankle. Stupid bastard! I fell to the ground and yelled out in pain. Immediately, Nick was on comms. Hold! Everyone hold! Bossman is down! What the fuck was he doing? I grabbed his neck, comms and all, and sputtered. Belay that. Get the fuck back to base. I'll hide here until you can think of a plan to get me out of here. Now go! There were several calls on the radio and from the boys around me, but they all seemed to stop when I barked, That's an order! Who the fuck was I to be giving them orders? Reluctantly, they all left, and I left on my own with a busted ankle. The enemy bearing down on my POS. I lay there, surrounded by dead tinnies. In fact, I seemed to have twisted my ankle on some tinny equipment that I had somehow managed to wrap around my leg. The tinny we had performed the ceremony for was laying not 2 meters from me. It didn't take long for the tinnies to come down on my level. 3 minutes after my guys had left Max, I started hearing their grunts and calls. I carefully looked over one of the corpses and I saw a bunch of tinnies making pickup. They were hoisting their dead on living tinny shoulders and carting them off. I guess one of them must have seen me because the next thing I knew there were shouts of, Schalke! And one even opened fire on me. Luckily having partial cover thanks to the bodies the tinny missed, but my luck wouldn't last though. Next shot would be a definite kill. All they had to do was converge my POS, and I was done. I could feel the tremor of the ground as they made their way towards me. There were aggressive shouts and a lot of snarling. By the time they made it to me, I knew I was done. I felt a hand grab onto me, and a gun jammed into my ribs. This is it. I'm done. Then there was a call from one of them. Their commander, I would guess. He shouted something and the others stopped. As I turned my head to look at him, I realized he was less looking at me, and more studying the dead tinny at my side. He gave out orders, and the rest of his unit fanned out all around me. I could feel the hatred seething from every single one of these bastards. I guess it's a natural response to aggression, but this commander guy seemed cool-headed enough. He looked at the dead tinny, his mouth broken open. Then he turned to me. Ektadu jala meka. What the fuck? What the hell did that mean? The tinny seemed to understand my confusion. He pointed at me, then put his fists together before pulling them apart violently, and pointing at the dead tinny on the ground and repeated, Ektadu jala meka? Yes, I did that. I nodded and repeated the words. Shantra ekovi malan. The words seemed to send a wave of astonishment through the group. Most of them seemed surprised. Their commander was studying me, but one of their numbers rushed me, weapon raised. Ma'ani. That was the word, right? Mercy. Don't hit me. I am your prisoner. I am not a threat. I repeated. Ma'ani. The words seemed to give the troop a pause, especially the guy who had rushed me. There came a sound that was like water rushing over water, coming from all the tinnies around me. Well, no, not all of them. Their commander was still crouching over me, looking at me quietly. He barked something I didn't understand. His guys seemed to fan out around me. That's when my radio crackled. Boss man, give the word. We have enough of them to give you an opportunity to get out of Dodge. Shit! I forgot to turn my radio off. My hand immediately flew up to the comms to shut it off. Then I paused. This could be good. They had no idea what we were saying, hopefully. We could take them all and the boys could get me out of here. The entire tinny contingent froze, guns raised, pointing out in all directions. Their commander looked at me and whispered, Shalak? This was a great opportunity to take them all. But then came a little voice from the back of my brain. They spared you. I carefully spoke into comms. Hold. There was a moment of agitation from the tinnies, as they realized I was communicating with my buddies. They all scrambled to cover. The commander looked at me. I could see his dilated pupils, his increased breathing. The radio squawked again. Sean. Boss man? Confirm. I said hold. We might have an opportunity here. I have opened talks with the tinnies. Boss man? Just trust me. An interminable 2-second pause. Understood. We're maintaining Overwatch. Then I racked my brain for all the tinny words I had picked up over the course of this op as I slowly spoke. Gregor, you stay with Sean to cover us. Same for Isaac. Choose a spotter and take up defensive positions. The rest of you boys get down here. Slow. Real slow. I think we can talk this out. The tinny looked at me suspiciously. I let go of my radio and put my hands out, trying to show him that I held no weapon. Then I slowly brought my right index finger to my eye, then pointed at the direction the boys would be coming in. Sean did tell me over comms. Isaac and I are in position. Gregor and Nick are spotting. Others inbound. The tinny commander looked at me and nodded when he started to see them, 5 minutes later, slowly making their way towards us. The boys had the good sense to put their hands up and stow their gear. When they got there, Andrew mumbled to me, "Boss man, what are we doing here?" I took a deep breath and mumbled back, "Trying something new." The tinny commander had quietly ordered his people to fan out. As I looked, I realized they were positioning themselves to avoid crossfire. Well, shit. So much for trust. That said, they haven't shot us yet. That has to count for something. I pointed to the comms and nodded. The tinny nodded back and I called out over the radio, "If this goes foobar, light them up." Isaac's reply took milliseconds. "Copy that, boss man." I quickly added, "But for the moment, we hold." There was a second's pause, as Isaac unhappily answered, "I heard you the first time. Holding." I could see the boys nervously looking around. I couldn't blame them. I think this was the first time in human history that the tinnies and humans were in such close proximity and didn't shoot each other. I looked around the carnage of dead bodies and saw that the other tinnies were doing the same. I tried to read their faces, but fuck if I know. We had come this far, might as well go all in. I took a deep breath and said, looking straight at their commander, "We pick up our human, you pick up your tinny." I tried to put emphasis to make him understand. There was a grumble, followed by, "Sure, Jack." Sure, Jack? From the tone, it sounded like frustration. Repeating my statement, I pointed, first at me. "We," I tried mimicking the movement, "pick up," then at Matthew. Then I pointed at them and slowly said, "You," and again the movement, "pick up," then at a dead tinny. The commander looked at me and shook his head sideways. "Tuck?" "Tuck? Tuck yes, tuck no. What's tuck?" I didn't know if he understood, but we were going to try. I nodded to him and said, "Jimmy, Steve, and Andrew, stay put. That leaves Nick, Mark, and Nellie to do pickup. Get to work. Slowly. Stow the weapons." I hadn't broken eye contact with this guy, and realized as I was giving out my orders, so was he. About 10 or so tinnies broke off from the formation and started going towards the fallen bodies of their comrades. I realized that none of his guys were holding weapons up either. It was a tense moment, but we had found common ground. In this godforsaken place, we had found a modicum of civilization. We would take care of the dead. It took my guys 2 hours to dig Matthew's grave. No spades, and we were going to bury him right. 6 feet, no less. I thought it would be appropriate to speak and mumbled a few words about how he was a great kid who died doing what he loves best, that we would never forget his sacrifice. He was a hero. I am not particularly religious, and to my shame, I didn't know if Matthew himself was a believer, but I finished by saying that Matthew was going to heaven, and that he would be welcomed in the kingdom eternal. I saw the rest of the boys were starting to tear up. Mark signed himself. There were quiet salts from the boys, and I was in very serious danger of joining them. I looked away to see how the tinnies were doing, but realized they were nowhere near finished. They had spent quite a lot of time trying to piece the bodies together before doing the decapitation thing. Not to judge, but what's the point in decapitating a dead body that was in, 12 bits? Anyway, it wasn't my place to question their customs. Whatever the case, we had finished way before the tinnies, and it felt wrong to just leave now. So we watched them in silence for another 10 minutes until Ali piped up. Sir? Should we be giving them a hand? I don't know. I didn't read the book on how to deal with Xeno's religious ceremonies. That was Cappy's job. I did what I was told. Point the dangerous end of the weapon towards the Xeno and hit the button. I was just a grunt, not officer material. But I don't know. I guess it couldn't hurt. I raised my voice a little and said, "Hey." There was an immediate rise in the tension. "Ali," and I pointed. "Mark," point again. "Nick," again, and "me," pointing at me, "will help you." I pointed at each of us, then at the slowly diminishing number of dead tinnies still on the ground. I guess having a ceremony for each of them did slow things down. There was a chuff from the tinnies, but they didn't move. I got on comms and told Isaac's team what we were going to do. "Copy. Be careful, boss man." The four of us stayed clumped together and moved towards a dead tinny. We slowly picked him up. There were a few yells, but no weapons raised for the moment. "Okay, boys. Nice and easy." We slowly went back to the tinny group and carefully put the corpse down. Nick thought it would be nice to put him in a repose, whatever that was. He picked up each arm and gently put it on the dead tinny's chest. The rest of the tinnies looked at us in silence, and if there ever was a language barrier, I think we pulverized it. Then we went in silence to the next tinny corpse and brought him to the group. As we walked past, I noticed several of them put their hand to their chest and mumbled, "Merlock." Thank you. For the rest of the day, we helped the tinnies take care of their fallen. The commander came to me and nodded. "Merlock." I nodded back. "Yes, thank you. You're welcome." He tilted his head and responded, slowly, "Thank you. Pick up. Help you." I was baffled he knew our language, but, well, I had picked up a few tinny words too, so why shouldn't he? For the next 25 minutes, we all worked in silence, picking up our buddies. Suddenly, we all heard the sonic boom of an orbital insertion. Sean's radio roared to life. "Command, this is Firehawk, entering the zone. Confirmed. We have friendlies on the ground. 10 beacons. Scans say they are surrounded by enemy combatants." We didn't seem to have Command's reply, but the pilot went on. "Confirmed. Starting run." Fuck no. I grabbed Sean's comms and spouted, Negative, negative. Friendlies on site. Diplomatic approach successful." There was a short pause when another voice chimed in. "This is Admiral Huxley. Ignore that order. Continue bomb run. Who is speaking? Who the hell are you?" I didn't know what to answer that. There was no reason not to hit confirmed tangos in the open, even if friendlies were on site. My diplomatic approach wasn't sanctioned, wasn't even known by the higher-ups. Hell, if I got out of this, they could probably court-martial me for collusion with the enemy. I didn't know what to say. As I looked at the tinnies around me, panicking, my boys a look of despair written on their faces, I did what I thought best. "Negative. That is an illegal order." "Belay that. Friendly comms have been compromised." "Negative. You're in violation of Article 27 of the 1899 Hague Regulations, sir." "Who the hell is this?" "This is PFC Dave Brumberg. We have opened diplomatic talks with the tinnies." There was only a gruff, "What?" for answer. I was panicking and sputtered, "Performing that run will be violating Article 27 and thus be unlawful." "What? Why?" "This is hallowed ground, sir."